for now, I'd like to introduce, let me preface, the next two talks are by the Freedom to Communicate Forum and Freedom #2 Connect, neither of which have any formal ties to the F2C Freedom to Connect conference. And if I were in corporate America, I would say, cease, desist, stop using my intellectual property, find another name that's not confusing and go away. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, the people from the Freedom to Communicate Forum and from Freedom #2 Connect have agreed to come and explain what they're doing, how it links to what goes on in this room otherwise, and how it doesn't. And maybe this will be the start of a beautiful alliance where we can expand the meaning of the freedom to connect, the freedom to communicate, and deepen the notion of freedom, connection, and communication. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Amy Garmer, who is with the Aspen Institute's Freedom and Connectivity program, and the author of a report from a forum on the freedom to communicate. Amy, take it away.
Thanks a lot, David. I'm really pleased to be here to have a chance to talk to everybody. And it's gracious of you to invite us at the risk of further confusion. Hopefully we won't be doing that. And hopefully what we're doing at the Aspen Institute Forum on the Freedom to Communicate is extending these critical issues into broader audiences and broader realms of discussion in the Western Hemisphere. The Aspen Institute Communications and Society program created the Forum on the Freedom to Communicate a little over a year ago with the intent to take a critical look at issues that are surrounding the freedoms of expression and connectivity in the Western Hemisphere, and to then identify actionable steps that can be taken to enhance these freedoms in the Americas. As we all know, as we get deeper into the digital age, these issues of the freedom to communicate and freedom to connect are becoming more urgent. Countries obviously are taking different approaches to managing the risks and opportunities of the internet. We would like to see more countries taking the more positive approaches, the more open and freedom-loving, enabling approaches. We know that connectivity is important for a whole host of reasons. It's critical for development in the 21st century. So it's important for individuals, it's important for economic growth, competition, for civic life, community problem solving, political engagement, government transparency, a whole bundle of reasons which I think makes it a compelling topic for us to be convening groups of leaders and citizens throughout the Americas to talk about. So as communication issues top local, national, and international agendas, there are a lot of questions that revolve around the proper role of government in building the digital future, in understanding what the responsibilities of business, civil society, and citizens are, and identifying the policies and practices that are emerging as indicators for future success. So in convening our first inaugural forum meeting, we partnered with two groups in Mexico that are connected. One, Caminos de la Libertad, is an organization that promotes issues of liberty and freedom in Mexico through a series of essay contests and sponsorship of forums in Mexico and other activities. And they were part of Grupo Salinas, who was the primary partner with the Aspen Institute in this. We decided to focus on issues of connectivity and issues of journalism. Journalistic issues, the freedom to practice the craft and the trade have been issues of concern to the Aspen Institute Communications and Society program for a long time. And, if any of you have read the paper in the past 6 years of the last presidential administration in Mexico, you know that practicing journalism in Mexico is just about the most dangerous thing that you can do in life. So we decided to focus the agenda around connectivity and around issues of journalism. We met for the first forum in Mexico City at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Monterrey Technological Institute, the campus in Mexico City. We had a large gathering of a couple hundred students and faculty that engaged with 16 special invited guests from journalism, business and government leaders, and academic experts, and they represented the United States, Mexico, and a variety of countries in Latin America. It was a particularly good time for us to meet in February of last year because it was ahead of the presidential elections taking place in Mexico on July 1st and the swearing in of the new president, Enrique Peña Nieto, on December 1st of this year. So what we were hoping to do was come out with a report that had some strong analysis of the state of connectivity and the freedom to communicate in Mexico that could be presented along with recommendations of our forum to the incoming administration. Because we were based in Mexico and had such a large Mexican audience to engage with, most of the discussion did center on Mexico and 3 issues of concern in particular, and that's the state of broadband connectivity, competition in the telecom sector, and censorship. So we looked at it as 3 C's: connectivity, competition, and censorship. The 2 key takeaways from the forum. The first is that economic and political success in the region is going to depend on the ability of each individual country to address issues of connectivity, competition, and censorship. The second is that sustaining healthy democracies throughout the hemisphere will depend on each country taking concrete steps to protect the free flow of information, the free flow of ideas, and foster environments in which communication and creativity can flourish. Because I think, as we've heard here, there's just an incredibly strong link between the freedom to communicate and creativity and innovation that that really has advanced society into the 21st century. Walter Isaacson, the president of the Institute, gave the keynote address at our forum, and he pointed out that Mexico and the U.S. share a culture that really values and understands the power that comes when ideas flow freely and people can debate, and that he posited that there will be 2 types of nations in the 21st century: those that embrace the free flow of information and are comfortable with it, and those that are threatened by it. And he essentially, laid down a challenge to the participants there to define what kind of nation each nation in the Americas will be. So, in our discussion over the course of one full day, the participants and the panelists at the forum identified 8 major barriers to connectivity and the freedom to communicate in the Americas. Let me see if I can. Paul, will this bring me down? I don't know if this is going to go to the next. Okay, I'll just go over those. The first is lack of infrastructure. Just over 30% of Mexico's total population of 112 million people is connected to the internet. So 70% of Mexico does not have an internet connection. Only 10% currently has broadband. Clearly not a model for a successful country into the 21st century. The second major barrier is lack of political consensus. Political consensus pushes the reality, and without consensus across government, within markets, there's going to be no comprehensive plan for connecting Mexico. Currently, of the the poorest 40% of Mexicans, only 4% have an internet connection, and less than half have a mobile phone. So there's a lot of work still to be done in a country that's getting a lot of attention lately for kind of being on the edge or the verge of a renaissance and a resurgence. The political consensus needs to include all stakeholders in society, not just government and business interests, businesses with a vested interest, but they need to make sure that they pull in civil society actors, citizens, education, everybody around to form a broad consensus. They also noted a need for regulatory reform. The third major barrier is insufficient telecom investment. In real terms, investment in the telecom sector in Mexico has declined over the past 10 years. The latest data available from the Ministry of Communications says that in 2001, both private and public investments combined totaled around 53 billion Mexican pesos, and 10 years later, that number was down to 41 billion. Mexico ranks last in telecom investment per capita among OECD countries. Fourth major barrier, lack of competition. One company, América Móvil, with its subsidiaries Telmex and Telcel, dominates both fixed line and wireless markets. 80% of fixed line is controlled by América Móvil, 70% of wireless. Cost of service is another major barrier. OECD found that prices for high-speed internet in Mexico are among the highest in OECD countries. In 2011, the average monthly broadband subscription for speeds between 2 and 15 megabits per second exceeded $90. Legal issues. Legal issues are a major concern in Mexico because of the structure of laws and the way the judicial system works. Analog era laws to digital era services, it's problematic. The laws don't reflect the fundamentally new characteristic relationships, norms, and business models that are emerging in the digital society. When governments do attempt to craft new laws for digital space, they often restrict or have the effect of restricting user rights in ways that really aren't commensurate with the harm that they're trying to prevent. The last two types of barriers, social and cultural barriers, the problems that we've seen here in this country with people needing additional tools and skills, digital literacy skills. They need to overcome fear of what it means to be on the internet and to be in that space. But digital literacy primarily was the largest one mentioned. And then finally, direct and indirect censorship. Big problem in the Americas overall, but not just coming from governments. The effect of the drug war has been felt really strongly in the area of journalism, where now with 90% of crimes against journalists unsolved and uninvestigated for the most part, it's pretty much shut down all investigative journalism in Mexico and all crime reporting. So the recommendations of the forum. There are 5 recommendations that the forum put forth and presented to the transition team of the incoming president. 1, to develop a national consensus and plan for the digital society, make telecom a top agenda item, and create a national campaign that will drive investment and engagement in the information economy. Recommendation 2, develop the digital infrastructure. Make investments. Where markets fail, government has a role to subsidize investment and spur the development of broadband, but as Alec Ross, who participated in the forum, said, the Hippocratic Oath for government should first do no harm. Recommendation 3 was Mexico needs to develop a culture of innovation, and along with that, recommendation 4, develop an ecosystem for investment in innovation, that successful countries invest in innovation, and innovation springs from the knowledge and the curiosity and talent of its people. So the need is to nurture those places in society where curiosity and talent and creativity are promoted, like universities, cultural institutions, and corporate research and development centers. And then finally, recommendation 5, develop an enabling environment for freedom and connectivity. First and foremost, Mexico needs to do more to preserve a free press and the freedom to communicate. They need to reevaluate their electoral reform law of 2007. They need to reject censorship and enact a constitutional amendment that would protect the rights and role and work of journalists in Mexico. So I think what we're doing with the Aspen Institute Forum on the Freedom to Communicate is complementary with the goals of the F2C and other groups. We hope to reconvene again later this year in Mexico and see if we can get some more traction on some of these recommendations in Mexico. I thank you for your attention today.